Hello, and welcome to our new short video series, Spartan Stories, Tales from UNC Greensboro's University Archives. I'm Erin Lawrimore, your University Archivist, and I'm going to introduce you to some people, events, and other stories from UNCG's history. Stories you might not know or that you might have forgotten. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Lula Martin McIver. You may know her husband, Charles McIver. He was UNC Greensboro's founding president, and he's the guy who was memorialized with a statue in front of Jackson Library. But Lula Martin McIver was a force in her own right, a staunch advocate for women's education in an era long before women had the right to vote. The fight for women's education is one that Lula Martin McIver started as a young girl, developed further with her husband Charles, and continued until her death. Lula was born Lula Verlinda Martin in Salem, North Carolina, on June 8, 1864, to Dr. Samuel Martin, a dentist, and Verlinda Miller Martin, who had actually graduated with honors from Edgeworth Seminary in Greensboro. Young Lula grew up surrounded by books and scientific instruments and dreamed of becoming a physician one day. But in the 19th century, the path for women wishing to become medical doctors was almost non-existent. She attended the prestigious Salem Academy, graduating in 1881. Ultimately, however, she chose to pursue a career as a teacher over her dreams of becoming a physician. She began her career teaching in a one-room private school and later in the Oxford Orphanage. 4 years after beginning her teaching career, Lula met a fellow teacher named Charles Duncan McIver. In 1885, the couple married. Lula, however, retained her strong sense of independence and her belief that, quote, a woman was an individual with a right to her own mind, her own property, and her own privileges. Lula actually refused to wear a wedding ring because she believed it to be a symbol of the oppression of women. Around the time of their marriage, Charles became heavily involved in local teachers' institutes, which sought to provide professional training for educators throughout North Carolina. At the time, the state had no formal system for training its teachers, and funding for public schools was sparse. Lula was an essential part of the institute's success, doing everything from practice teaching demonstrations to scrubbing and cleaning the local courthouses that were used as training sites. Most of the teachers' institutes took place during the summer months when the public schools were not in session. During the academic year, beginning in 1886, the McIvers both taught at Peace Institute in Raleigh. Lula also briefly held the position of lady principal at the Charlotte Female Institute, now Queen's University. During this time, Charles also contemplated leaving education for a career as a lawyer, a decision he ultimately abandoned. But Lula joined him in studying the law because she said, quote, her mind needed the constant stimulation of study and learning. In fact, Charles often told a story of coming home to find Lula completely absorbed, lying across the bed with her chin in her hands, reading the legal rights of married women in England. During her time in Charlotte, Lula actually did study also with Dr. Annie Laurie Alexander, the first North Carolina woman to become a physician and practice in the state. In 1892, the McIvers moved to Greensboro after Charles was named president of the newly established State Normal and Industrial School, now UNCG. As the campus's first lady, Lula took on numerous responsibilities. She took charge of selecting furnishings for the sole dormitory on campus at the time and attended to much of the campus landscaping and beautification projects. She was also responsible for advocating for the hiring of Dr. Miriam Bidding as the campus's first physician, insisting at a women's college that they needed a female medical doctor to be in charge of the health of the students. Also, on the frequent occasions when Charles was away from the campus, Lula stepped in to handle much of the school's business. She would give a quiz for a civics class, or monitor the campus coal supply, or advise the campus physician about a threatening measles outbreak. She frequently served as a host for guests waiting to meet with Charles, and she often served as a mother figure for many of the students. Lula also became a staunch advocate for the increased state support for education in North Carolina. She was a founding member of the Women's Betterment Association, which specifically worked for improving facilities for public schools across the state. Lula assisted county leaders throughout the state, and at one time served as a field director. Only 4 years after the creation of the Women's Betterment Association, 1,133 new school buildings were constructed in rural areas across North Carolina at a cost of nearly $500,000. The total value of the entirety of public school property across the state almost doubled in that short 4-year period. Unfortunately, Charles McIver died in September of 1906, but Lula and her 4 children remained in the McIver house on the state normal campus. The 2 oldest McIver children, Annie and Charlie, were among the 10 students enrolled in the first practice school on the state normal campus. Annie went on to graduate from state normal in 1905. Their youngest daughter, who was also named Lula, was a member of the class of 1921 at the institute her parents founded. Charles Jr. graduated from his father's alma mater, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, in 1909. A 4th child, Verlinda, died at a young age in 1908. Lula continued to be an active presence on campus and remained a strong advocate on a number of social causes, including the YWCA, Sunday schools, the Community Art Association, and educational institutions for both white and African American students across the state. Lula suffered a broken hip in 1930 and was wheelchair-bound, limiting her ability to be as active as she had been before. But she still attended the annual Founders Day ceremony on campus every October. On December 22, 1944, Lula Martin McIver passed away at age 80. At the Founders Day service the following October, college president Walter Clinton Jackson noted that, quote, "Death last December broke Mrs. McIver's long connection with this college, but death cannot remove her benevolent spirit from this campus, nor can it stop the force which she, working with and through her husband, started for the advancement of educational opportunities for women in North Carolina." That year, students placed wreaths on both the graves of Charles and Lula McIver as part of the Founders Day ceremony, conscious of the fact that Dr. McIver himself would feel that this was indeed a just and proper recognition of one who may rightfully be called the co-founder of the college. I hope you enjoyed this Spartan story. You can find lots more on our Spartan Stories blog. Visit uncghistory.blogspot.com.
Welcome back to our video series, Spartan Stories, Tales from UNC Greensboro's University Archives. In this series, we're introducing you to some people, events, or other stories from UNCG's history. Stories you might not know, or that you might have forgotten. Today we're going to explore some of the bygone buildings of UNCG and look at the fate of some of the earliest campus structures. At the time of its opening in 1892, the State Normal and Industrial School, now UNCG, consisted primarily of 4 buildings, 2 dormitories, a main building, and the president's home. Smaller outbuildings existed, but these 4 structures served as the heart of campus activity. Today, only the main building remains. In 1960, it was renamed the Faust Building in memory of the institution's second president, Julius Faust. So what happened to the other original structures? Brick Dormitory was one of 2 campus buildings in the original plans created by the architecture firm of Epps and Hackett in Greensboro. It was also known as the Matron's Hall or the Living Building. Like the main building, Brick Dormitory was built of brick, trimmed with granite, covered with metal shingles, and plastered with cement. Brick Dormitory was located to the east of Main Building, near the site of the new Nursing and Instructional Building. The 3-story brick dormitory was built in various stages. By 1895, it included a kitchen, an infirmary room, and a dining hall that held 150 students. A final wing was added at the rear of the building in 1903 to add more student rooms and larger dining and kitchen facilities. Brick Dormitory also served as a site for socialization amongst the students. In the evenings between study hour and lights out, students would sit on the steps singing songs and telling stories. Unfortunately, around 3:45 a.m. on the night of January 20th, 1904, the campus night watchman discovered a fire and began evacuating residents of Brick Dormitory. Faculty resident Minnie Lou Jameson and students quickly alerted all of the 300-plus residents of Brick Dormitory. One student resident, Josephine Scott, ran outside in her nightgown to ring the college bell and sound the alarm until everyone was safely out of the building. Thanks to these alerts, as well as previous fire drills, no lives were lost and no one was seriously injured in the evacuation. The dormitory building, however, was completely destroyed, with total loss due to the fire evaluated at nearly $65,000. The other residence hall in the early years of our university was originally known as Wooden Dormitory. The 22-room residence hall was nicknamed Midway after the Chicago Exposition of 1893 and later called Guilford Dormitory. This frame building was not included in the original building agreement between the school and the city of Greensboro, so the school's board of directors were forced to mortgage the property along with the president's house for $9,000. As was the case with Brick Dormitory, students who lived in Wooden Dormitory were directly supervised by lady assistants who served almost as house mothers. The students in Wooden Dormitory, however, faced an extra challenge compared to those in Brick Dormitory. Rigid standards of dress dictated that no lady could be seen on the streets without hat and gloves. Therefore, students had to be properly attired before they could walk from their room in Wooden Dormitory to the dining hall in Brick Dormitory. The college's first practice school was housed in the right wing of the dormitory until Curry Building was constructed. The dormitory was raised in 1935 to make room for the current Alumni House. Finally, the fourth building from the original campus was the President's House. This 2-story, 10-room house was built in 1892 on the southwest corner of College Avenue and Spring Garden Street for President Charles Duncan McIver and his family. Although President McIver passed away in 1906, Mrs. McIver lived there until her death in December 1944. The President's house was torn down in 1952. Soon after, the class of 1923, on the occasion of its 30th reunion, commissioned a small brick foundation from which the original 1892 school bell, or university bell, would hang. In 1967, on the occasion of the university's 75th anniversary, the student body voted to build a more elaborate brick setting on the site and named this Student Anniversary Plaza. Student Anniversary Plaza was renovated in 2005 to incorporate the VAC bell tower. I hope you enjoyed this Spartan story and our look at bygone buildings from the early years of UNCG. You can find lots more on our Spartan Stories blog at uncghistory.blogspot.com. Hi, and welcome to our video series, Spartan Stories, Tales from UNC Greensboro's University Archives. We're going to introduce you to some people, events, and other stories from UNCG's history. Stories you might not know or that you might have forgotten. Today, we're going to explore athletics and sports at State Normal. While competitive athletics are a major part of campus life at UNCG today, early students had to fight for their right to play ball. From its opening in 1892, the State Normal, now UNCG, emphasized physical activity and personal health. A course in physical culture was required of all students. The work included gymnastics, calisthenics, and other exercises that were meant to promote the students' general health and strength. A small gymnasium was built on the top floor of the main building, now Faust. Students, however, wanted opportunities for athletic team competition, not just physical activity. The graduating class of 1900 convinced school president Charles Duncan McIver of the need for a campus athletic association and purpose-built athletic grounds. The Campus Athletic Association was formally established in 1900. By 1902, it had adopted the motto, "Athletics and active college work go hand in hand." In a space that is now the site of the Petty Building, the women of the Athletic Association cleared and prepared playing grounds, marked the fields, and installed nets on 4 tennis courts as well as basketball goals. For the most part, however, team sports were limited to on-campus competition between the classes in an effort to focus the students more on the importance of activity and less on competition. As one student noted, quote, "We were taught very strongly the evils that would come from interscholastic sports. The emphasis on winning at any cost was the worst." Basketball proved to be an especially popular sport with the students. Rules for women's basketball were first introduced in 1892 at Smith College. These rules were modified specifically for the women's game, as it was feared that women could not physically or mentally handle the strain of the men's rules. The court was divided into 3 areas, and 3 players from each team were allowed in an area at a time, with 9 players total on the court at a time per team. The ball was moved from section to section by passing or dribbling. Players were limited to only 3 dribbles and could hold the ball for 3 seconds at a time. No snatching or batting the ball away from a player was allowed. At State Normal, the student-led athletic association coordinated most sports events on campus. By 1914, the group offered events in basketball, tennis, field hockey, baseball, cricket, golf, camping, and gymnastics. They also sponsored May Day, Field Day, and various sports tournaments throughout the year. Through their dedication and persistence, the women of the Athletic Association ensured that athletics would be a strong component of their college life. I hope you enjoyed this Spartan story. You can find lots more on our Spartan Stories blog at uncghistory.blogspot.com.